A deadly U.S. military strike in the Caribbean Sea has sent shockwaves through the region, leaving governments and citizens alike grappling with the aftermath. The incident has ignited a diplomatic crisis between the United States and Colombia, straining an already delicate relationship. On October 17, 2025, U.S. forces targeted and destroyed a small boat in open waters, killing all 3 people on board in a matter of seconds. The Pentagon claimed the operation was precise and based on solid intelligence, but so far, the identities of the deceased remain unconfirmed, fueling speculation and concern. Conflicting narratives from Washington and Bogotá have only fueled uncertainty and controversy, with both sides offering sharply different accounts of what happened and why. This incident is part of a broader, more aggressive U.S. military strategy in the region, signaling a dramatic shift from law enforcement operations to open military action against suspected drug traffickers and criminal networks. The strike has raised urgent questions about sovereignty, justice, and the rules of engagement in the ongoing war on drugs, challenging the legal and ethical boundaries of international intervention. For local communities, the attack has created a climate of fear and anxiety, turning once peaceful and vital waterways into potential conflict zones where danger could strike at any moment. The explosion's impact has rippled far beyond the site, shaking diplomatic foundations, challenging international norms, and prompting urgent calls for accountability. The U.S. has framed the strike as a necessary military action, not a law enforcement measure, a critical distinction that could set a precedent for future operations in the region. This approach allows for the use of lethal force based on suspicion alone, bypassing traditional processes of arrest or trial, and raising concerns about due process and human rights. The event has quickly become a symbol of a rapidly deteriorating partnership and a new, more confrontational era in regional politics, with both sides digging in their heels. Families who depend on the sea for their livelihoods now face unpredictable dangers, unsure whether their daily routines might put them in harm's way. The world is watching closely as the consequences of this strike continue to unfold, with international media and foreign governments demanding answers. The question remains, will this new military approach bring stability and security, or will it only add more chaos and uncertainty to an already troubled region? The shockwaves from one destroyed boat have reached far beyond the Caribbean, echoing in capitals and communities around the world. The future of U.S.-Colombia relations hangs in the balance as both nations and the world wait to see what happens next. The U.S. government insists the targeted boat was operated by criminals tied to Colombia's ELN rebel group, not innocent fishermen. Officials maintain that the intelligence leading to the strike was credible and specific, pointing to a network of traffickers with a history of violence and evasion. Officials allege the vessel was smuggling narcotics, and that it was part of a larger operation funneling drugs into North America. They claim the boat was linked to a designated terrorist organization, justifying a military response under new legal frameworks. The Pentagon released a brief aerial video of the strike, hoping to demonstrate transparency and resolve. However, the footage offers no clear evidence of drugs or weapons on board, leaving many questions unanswered. The intelligence behind the operation remains classified, fueling skepticism and international criticism from both allies and watchdog groups. Under a new Trump administration doctrine, major drug cartels are treated as hostile enemy forces, blurring the line between law enforcement and military action. Suspected smugglers are now classified as unlawful combatants, subject to military targeting. This legal shift allows the U.S. military to use lethal force in situations previously handled by police, bypassing traditional law enforcement procedures and judicial oversight. The October strike exemplifies this aggressive policy, treating the boat as a legitimate military target rather than a civilian vessel. The U.S. argues that decades of conventional anti-drug strategies have failed to stem the tide of narcotics, and that cartels now pose a direct threat to national security, requiring a more forceful response. Critics, including many U.S. allies, question the effectiveness, legality, and morality of this approach, warning of unintended consequences and civilian harm. The world is being asked to trust U.S. intelligence without transparency or independent verification. The strike is presented as a defensive action, necessary to protect American interests and lives. But the controversy is far from settled, as lawmakers and human rights groups demand answers. The debate over evidence and justification continues to divide the international community, raising fundamental questions about the future of global drug enforcement and military intervention. Colombia's response was swift and furious. President Gustavo Petro rejected U.S. claims, insisting the boat belonged to a local family, not the ELN. He accused the U.S. of killing innocent civilians and condemned the strike as a violation of Colombian sovereignty. The diplomatic clash escalated on social media, with Petro calling President Trump rude and ignorant. Colombia's foreign ministry denounced the U.S. military presence as an overreach and threatened to seek international support against Washington's actions. This incident is the latest in a series of escalating tensions, with both sides trading accusations and retaliatory measures. For Colombia, the strike is not just about one boat. It's a defense of national honor and the right to self-determination. In a dramatic move, President Trump announced an immediate halt to all U.S. financial aid to Colombia. The decision, delivered via social media, was a direct response to Colombia's defiance over the boat strike. Trump accused President Petro of encouraging drug production, an unprecedented attack between allies. The aid cutoff severs a decades-long financial lifeline, threatening anti-drug programs and security cooperation. In 2023, Colombia received $740 million in U.S. aid, much of it for counter-narcotics efforts. The sudden loss leaves a massive hole in Colombia's budget and undermines years of joint initiatives. The move follows the closure of USAID operations and marks the culmination of a rapidly deteriorating relationship. Petro's shift away from forced coca eradication has fueled U.S. frustration as coca cultivation rises. The end of aid signals a profound rupture in U.S.-Colombia relations. The U.S.-Colombia alliance, once a cornerstone of regional policy, has collapsed. The decline began with Trump's return to office and clashing agendas with President Petro. U.S. warship deployments, military strikes, and the decertification of Colombia as a drug war partner deepened the rift. Colombia retaliated by halting arms purchases and denouncing U.S. actions. Personal insults between leaders have replaced diplomatic dialogue. Years of intelligence sharing and security cooperation are now over. Colombia is seeking new partners as the U.S. loses its most important ally in the region. The diplomatic vacuum opens the door for other global powers to expand their influence in South America. The U.S. military strategy in the Caribbean has drawn sharp condemnation from human rights groups and legal experts, who argue that such actions undermine established international norms. Organizations like Amnesty International have gone so far as to call the strikes murder on the high seas, insisting that these operations violate due process and fundamental principles of international law. The use of lethal force against suspects, without any attempt at arrest or trial, is widely seen as a grave human rights violation that erodes the rule of law and sets a troubling example for other nations. Legal scholars continue to question the legitimacy of declaring war on non-state actors, such as drug cartels, and whether the laws of armed conflict can or should be applied in these complex situations. The designation of suspected smugglers as unlawful combatants creates a legal gray zone, stripping them of basic protections under both domestic and international law, and leaving them vulnerable to abuse. Critics warn that this policy sets a dangerous precedent for extrajudicial killings, potentially opening the door to further abuses and increasing the risk of more innocent deaths in the region. The heavy U.S. naval presence near Venezuela has fueled fears of broader conflict and regional destabilization, raising concerns among neighboring countries and international observers alike. The intersection of legal, humanitarian, and geopolitical concerns has made the U.S. approach deeply controversial, sparking intense debate about the future of international law and the protection of human rights in conflict zones. The ELN remains a central player in Colombia's conflict and the U.S. justification for the strike. The ELN, Colombia's largest leftist guerrilla group, has deepened its involvement in the drug trade, especially near Venezuela. By linking the boat to the ELN, the U.S. frames the strike as counter-terrorism, not just counter-narcotics. President Petro's government is pursuing peace talks with the ELN, but the U.S. action undermines these efforts. The incident exposes a fundamental clash. The U.S. sees the ELN as terrorists, while Colombia seeks negotiation. The strike complicates peace efforts and deepens the divide between military and diplomatic strategies. The boat incident is now a flashpoint in the struggle between war and peace in Colombia. The October boat strike is part of a broader U.S. military campaign in the Caribbean. Since August 2025, U.S. forces have attacked at least 7 boats, resulting in dozens of deaths. The Pentagon justifies each strike as necessary to disrupt drug smuggling, but critics see a dangerous escalation. The deployment of U.S. warships near Venezuela has heightened regional tensions and fears of conflict. The Trump administration's reclassification of suspected traffickers as unlawful combatants has enabled a policy of lethal force. Human rights groups condemn the shift from interception to destruction as extrajudicial killing. The Caribbean Sea has become a de facto combat zone, with local communities caught in the crossfire. The U.S. believes overwhelming force will solve the drug problem, but many regional partners fear more violence and instability. The crisis forces a fundamental question. Is military force the answer to drug trafficking? The U.S. favors direct confrontation, aiming to disrupt cartels through fear and destruction. Critics argue the real solution lies in addressing poverty, lack of opportunity, and rural neglect. President Petro's approach emphasizes development and dialogue over force. The breakdown in U.S.-Colombia cooperation highlights the clash between eradication and transformation. The world must consider whether warships and missiles can end the drug trade, or if a more patient, holistic strategy is needed. The future of the region depends on the answers chosen now. As the smoke clears over the Caribbean, the debate over strategy and the fate of countless lives remains unresolved.